Right. To start off, two main things, two main consequences of climate change are warming temperatures and change in precipitation. So a big part of climate change is the rising temperature. So the average annual maximum daily temperature is to increase by 5.6 to 8.8 degrees by 2100. And although to us humans, it isn't much, think about the plants and animals. They don't have, air conditioning in the forest. So a lot of slight temperature increases are going to be detrimental to their environment and lifestyle. By 2050, heat waves in the city could cause 2 to 3 times more heat-related deaths. This is especially detrimental to, for example, the homeless population who don't have structures that don't have homes that have AC or climate control. And this is also detrimental to those with, let's say, breathing problems. I'm sure many of you guys might have like asthma. So it's going to be a lot harder to breathe because you're inhaling a lot of the hot air. Also, since 2000, the longest duration of drought in California, recorded by the US Drought Monitor, lasted 376 weeks from 2011 to 2019. So, so with little to no rainfall, dry environments are at like super high risk. I'm sure you've noticed the increase in a lot of wildfire activity lately. If you don't, you might see like ash in the sky. Well, that's how you know there's like a wildfire near you. So with dry weather and very high heat, these wildfires are gonna spread very quickly, which is very bad. All right, so on to why climate change occurs. So climate change, a big part of climate change is due to greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases, they're invisible, but they block the sunlight in the atmosphere. And because they block the sunlight, they also absorb it. So that's what's keeping the Earth's atmosphere pretty warm. And the main source of greenhouse gases is carbon dioxide. Most of it is made up by industry and transportation. So things like factories and cars. They both burn fossil fuels, which contain carbon atoms. And as you know, this is what forms carbon dioxide. So as I said before, climate change is largely linked to vegetation. And like even the slightest bit of a temperature increase can change an animal's lifestyle or a plant's life, determining whether it lives or dies. And because of this, large trees, for example, the ones that really suck in the carbon dioxide and gives us the oxygen, they're a lot more at risk of dying or not growing as well as they should be. So so things like urbanization as well from humans has led to animals to move into new habitats or a very small part of what used to be their habitat. And because of this, they don't have that as much resources. It's like moving into like, let's say the countryside where there's not that many supermarkets near you. You have to go through more effort to, get your food every day. So yeah. And lastly, on my side, there's 7 forms of pollution: air, water, soil, noise, radioactive, light, and even thermal that are impacting our environment. So the main types are air, water, and soil. So air pollutants, I'm sure many of you are kind of familiar with those. The effects can cause acid rain, smog, reduced and lung and heart function. So as I said, if you have like asthma, these things would be pretty bad for you. Farms and industry produce chemicals that run off into the water. So these can include lakes, ponds, streams, the ocean. And so when these chemicals pour into the water that fish live in, the fish that we eat, they're going to be absorbing those chemicals, whether through their gills or through eating. And a lot of the chemicals also contain plastics or a chemical known as PCB, which is also found in plastics. These chemicals are detrimental to their health. For example, in rats, there was a study done by rats where rats who have ingested PCB had late puberty, decreased sperm counts, and other things that are not so good for your health. So these also pollution occurs in landfills and industrial farming. So over time, these landfills and chemicals can cause soil to be inhabitable by plants. So, if you pour a bunch of chemicals into, let's say, your garden, then grass won't grow and, won't come to your garden anymore. Wildlife like birds, and you can't see the pretty birds anymore. So that's pretty sad.
So thank you, Alan. Now I will be going over what you can do to help the environment. So we know about air pollution and we tend to associate it with like outdoors or outside. Well, how about indoors? It turns out that indoor air can be a lot more harmful and potent than the air quality outdoors. And this could be due to multiple reasons, such as if these pollutants enter your homes and your buildings, well, it's more concentrated in that space. And like in the case of COVID right now, you get an increased risk of getting COVID if you're indoors. And it's just because the virus is kind of concentrated in one area in an enclosed space. And so that increases your risk to inhale it and get infected with it. In the same way with pollutants, it increases your likelihood of inhaling those pollutants that are bad for you. And not to mention, a lot of modern building material and things like that and technologies, they actually don't provide adequate ventilation and air exchange. And so those pollutants stay indoors and you inhale them. Not to mention, we also spend a lot of our time indoors. And so indoor air is definitely bad for us personally. And that leads to things like sick building syndrome, which is basically a bunch of illnesses that are related to being in a building. So it could be things like having a headache, fatigue, nasal congestion, sore throat, things like that. And once you leave the building for a short period of time, those symptoms go away because those symptoms obviously are caused by the poor indoor quality in these buildings. And that leads to a decrease in productivity since you're not feeling your best. That also leads to decreased efficiency in workplaces and in schools, and you're not doing your best in school either. And so a way to combat this is by adding more plants to indoor spaces, because plants, they can improve your air quality, they can suck out the pollutants from the air, they can brighten your space and enhance your mood since you're not going to be feeling all of these symptoms of sick building syndrome. Another way to help our environment is to change your food habits. This is a bit harder, but if you can at least take away 2 things from what I'm saying, that'd be great. So for this one, a majority of farm animals are actually raised in factory farms. And as you can see from the picture, it doesn't look pretty, but it poses a lot of problems, such as deforestation, because there's a lot of animals in these factory farms and you need a lot of land space, right? And so in order to raise them. And so you tend to cut down a lot of trees to make room for more land for these animals. Not to mention, these animals also need food. And so you need to dedicate another land space just to raise food and crops to feed them. These animals also need water. And so they spend a lot of water and consume a lot of water. And you also need to clean all of these facilities. So then you use even more water for that. These animals also will inhale a lot of oxygen and the nutrients from the air and also pass gas. They'll produce a lot of methane and carbon dioxide and things like that, which lead to air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. And they also, release a lot of waste and manure. And if you have a lot of this, some of them can leak and run off to like bodies of water, and that will contaminate these bodies of water and lead to water pollution. There are a lot of problems associated with this. And one of the things that you can do is to eat less meat. And yeah, that could be a little hard for all of us non-vegans and vegetarians. But anyways, red meat and processed meat is not really good for you anyways. It increases your risk of many cancers. And I'm actually taking a cancer biology class, and all we talk about is cancer and how many things can go wrong. And so just to eat, just eat more beans, veggies, and fruits. And you can even try growing your own food. You don't actually need a whole garden to grow your own food. You can just leave some space on your windowsill for a few like small plant pots so that you can raise or grow vegetables that are small and easy to grow. Like I've seen tomatoes are good, garlic, onion, celery. So those are a few examples. And now let's talk about the 3 R's of sustainability, which you've probably heard your whole life, which is reduce, reuse, and recycle. So I'll be going over each of them in a little bit detail so we can find out ways to help our environment. So first, reduce. So that includes, using fewer resources and basically decreasing or reducing your usage of things. And one of those is cars, vehicle emissions. So why should we reduce our usage? So based on the stats in 2018, transportation made about 28.2% of total US greenhouse gas emissions. And that might not seem a lot, 28.2%, but if you look at the data here on the right, or this image, you can see that transportation is actually the greatest sector out of that contributes to greenhouse gas emissions. Electricity and industry also play a role, but transportation is one of them. And so what can we do? Well, you could carpool, use public transportation like buses, bike or walk to destinations. And that's also good for you. You get some exercise in there. You can utilize a proven liquid fuel catalyst. And you might be wondering what the heck that is. Well, I also didn't know what that is, but it's basically a commercial product that increases like the combustion of these fuels. And basically what you get is where's my data? You basically get a decrease in emissions by 45%. And yeah, it's just another alternative that you can do if we can't afford buying a hybrid or an electric car. This is one way that you can do that. And then another one is to maintain your vehicle. So you do routine checkups for tire pressure, do regular oil changes, and basically minimize the amount of gas you use. So not using the AC too much when it's pretty cold outside or things like that. And just to use your fuel more efficiently and save your gas money. The next one is water usage. So the US Geological Survey estimates that we use about 1.7 trillion gallons of water each year. And so that's a lot of water. Actually, that water almost covers the entire area of California with 1 inch of water. And another statistic is that it can fill up to 2.6 million Olympic swimming pools. So that's a lot of water. And so what can we do to minimize our water usage? Well, you can be more aware of how you use water, not letting it run mindlessly when you're brushing your teeth or taking a shower or doing laundry. You basically try using washing appliances like our laundry only with a full load, so you can save some energy as well and your electricity bill along with your water bill. You can stop using the faucet when you're not really using it, like in the case of brushing teeth and showering and washing. You can also shorten your showers and keep it under 5 minutes. And that is actually a very short amount of time. But if you can at least try to decrease your shower time, that also helps. Also check for leaks and install low flow shower heads. So these are basically a little bit more on the expensive side, but they save you money in the long run since you're not using as much water and you're saving that electricity and water bill. Also opt for hand washing instead of machines, because with hand washing, you can control the amount of water you use. You're doing it manually compared to relying on a machine. And for electricity usage. So when appliances are off, make sure to unplug them as well, since it can still use energy, even if they're turned off, but plugged in. Try to buy appliances that have the Energy Star label, since they are made to use less energy. And by doing so, you can reduce energy demand and carbon emissions, since energy comes from the burning of fossil fuels, and we know that that contributes to climate change. Next, we'll look at reuse. So reusing things also goes in hand with reduce, since you're preventing waste. And also reusing allows, other people in the community to use the things that you don't have as well. And so some tips, I have about 5 of these here. So you can buy used items. So those they're usually more cheaper and they're just as good as new. You can buy products that use less packaging and that ultimately uses less materials and reduces waste and costs. A great example would be buying in bulk, since you're getting more for less packaging. You can borrow, rent, or share infrequently used items. So things like party decorations, tools, or furniture. You might as well borrow them rather than buying them and then throwing them away later on. Try buying reusable over one-time use items. So like those straws, Disco Girls, reusing containers and water bottles. Try to bring reusable items with you, like silverware and straws and cups. And try to maintain and repair those products so they can last longer and you won't have to throw them out as quickly. Lastly, we have recycling. So apparently the US only properly recycles around 30% of its waste, and that could be due to just not having, enough knowledge to know how to properly recycle and things like that. And so what can we do? So here are the do's. So keep the complete product together when you're recycling, like the caps on the bottle, since the caps also make up a lot of plastic, and just throwing them away in the landfill won't do any good. So make sure we want to recycle the caps as well. Crush to reduce the size so that it's easier for the recycling companies and they can recycle more things in one go. Empty the contents, of course, that makes it easier for them as well. And take batteries and electronics to specified recycling facilities, since these things, batteries have like chemicals in them and they need proper recycling techniques for that. Also pay attention to the plastic identification chart. In case you've noticed in your plastic bottles or any other plastic materials, there's going to be like a triangle, the recycling symbol with a number in it. And if you search that number up, like on Google, you can find out if that thing can be recycled or reused and things like that. For the don'ts, don't mix all the products together. Of course, you want to be able to, separate them and, that they can properly recycle these things. Don't recycle items that are stained with food or grease. Make sure to wash them to make it easier for those companies. Recycle dishware or don't recycle dishware or similar products. And this basically means like plates that are breakable. You already reuse these things. The recycling companies don't need them. And don't recycle compostable plastics, since these ones, they tend to degrade on their own and they don't belong in the recycling center. So yeah, that is my part. I'm going to pass it to Olivia. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, so a plug from us is we're hosting our HEDA College on December 6th, 2020 from 12 to 3. Whether you're a freshman or a senior, I'm sure that you guys can come to the event and get something out of it. We'll be having workshops, panels, and interviews where you can ask people about their major. And, you know, who else better to hear it from than college students themselves? So if you guys are interested, here's a link to the event page. Oh, here's a link to the event page in the chat. Registration is due on December 3rd. And so, yeah, it will be fun. Come out. Big thanks to VN for helping us, allowing us this opportunity to present on, you know, the environment. Big applause. Yep. With that, we'll pass it back to you.
Yay, thank you. Now let me start presenting again. Okay, thank you, Cal State Long Beach. Then we'll get into our